With the continuation of our discussion series on the Band of Brothers, we head to the not so cozy confines of the Ardennes region of Belgium. We get to know a little bit more about our featured character, Medic Eugene Rowe, and the roles medics play in the battlefield. While most of the men in Easy Company suffer from frostbite and depleted rations, Rowe inherits the struggle of constantly scrounging for supplies. With the Battle of the Bulge well underway, the American line is short of men and undersupplied, especially with a fog that won't lift. Can Easy Company pull it together despite the hardships of battle? Tonight, we head back to our frozen foxholes as we continue our discussion series on the Band of Brothers, Episode 6, Bastogne. This is a Comic Talkers production, and you are listening to Just for Flicks. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Patty B. With me, as always, in our frozen foxhole is Mr. B Dog, Mr. Brandon on this chilly winter night. How we doing tonight?
I'm excited. This is actually one of the battles that I love studying in history, and especially with the 101st Airborne. We're going to the Battle of the Bulge. And this is something I've been talking with you. I know we kind of talked about in last episode. It was kind of leading into it,
Yep.
where you have Jimmy Fallon making a guest appearance, pretty much telling winners that he pretty much once he enters these forests, there's really not a lot of help that he'll have at that point.
Mhm.
Once you enter these forests, essentially, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah, you
And it's
got to fight
exactly
through that
what they're
shit.
dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think this is what makes it so interesting, is because in this, and like we said, we're going to talk about our combat medic Eugene.
Mhm.
But the thing that's so interesting about this, it's the fear of the unknown too, a little bit. It's a
Yeah.
sense of they're more in their foxholes preparing for the worst. If it's artillery strikes, if it is soldiers coming their way, they don't know what's happening. And the thing is, with the winter, that brings another challenge into the mix where they're cold, they're running out of medical supplies on top of it. It's just left and right situations.
Like a frozen hell almost, right? I mean,
Exactly.
there's nothing good that comes from the situation that they're in. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, especially this episode and the episode that follows it. I mean, it's just hellacious, man. I just can't believe like you think about the sacrifices that everyone went through in this war, especially this war. It was a big war, a lot of people died, and just to have the fact that there were battles and there were conflicts like this in these kind of situations and elements like these, it's just absolutely crazy to think about because the fact that people did that, it's just nuts, man. It really is. It's just nuts all around, even for the other side. I mean, think about just both sides fighting. Like to be in that situation and fight. Like I don't know how cold exactly it was, but I mean, we see in the episode, obviously it's cold, and they didn't have winter clothes. I mean, they say that in that meeting between all of them in base camp or in the camp, where they don't have winter supplies, they don't have winter clothes, so they're not prepared for this situation.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that it brings an unknown challenge to them. You got to remember that the winter was a huge problem to them. And not only that, it wasn't that long ago that the German forces were in the same predicament when they tried to invade Russia.
Hmm.
It was such a big thing. And here you can tell they just came in with, oh, we're going to, because there's two different purposes in this. Okay. You got to remember this. Now, the Battle of the Bulge was about a month-long siege, if not a little bit more, from December to January. And so pretty much the United States goal was to halt the German offensive and prevent them from achieving their objectives. German forces' primary goal was to actually break through the Allied lines, recapture a port in Antwerp, which is in Belgium, and to drive a wedge between British and American forces, hoping that hoping to force the Allies to negotiate and split their war effort.
Hmm.
Now it's both ways, because even then, with the Americans ultimately coming on top, that pushed them closer to Germany. This is why I enjoy, and again, I really love combat medic stories, because you know me enough. One of my favorite movies of all time goes to Hacksaw Ridge. It is Desmond Doss. It is his journey and him earning his Medal of Honor by saving over 70 men in a matter of a night span. So it was kind of just and especially behind medic or enemy lines. This here, Eugene kind of brings a different interpretation to it. So having these moments where he, in some ways, you kind of get through his eyes how the supply shortage is really affecting him.
Hmm.
Because now he has to go scavenge from every soldier, if it's morphine, if it's bandages, if it's anything he can get to save people.
Yeah, and that's what I love this like this first 10 minutes of this episode. It's just I mean the way this episode starts after the interviews with the soldiers, which is crazy in itself. You know, I just talked about it off air, but there's one soldier that says, I saw a guy's arm get blown off, and he says, "Hey, can you get my wristwatch off my arm before you take me?" Like,
Yeah.
what? Um Another one where a guy, I don't know where he lived exactly, but it was a really chilly night. And he had to close the window, or he told his wife it's cold, and he's like, "I'm just thankful I'm not in Bastogne." And that's crazy to say because I think he even says like, "You can ask my wife; she'll say it too." You know, the fact that he's probably reiterated that so much to his wife obviously means it was a standout moment in his life to where he's like, "I don't ever want to deal with cold weather again because of this situation."
Well, you
Uh,
gotta you gotta remember too, like even a lot of these soldiers were at this point, it's like I said, you're kind of going into an unknown situation. You don't know what's going on. And essentially, when you really look at what American forces had compared to German forces,
yeah.
German pretty much outsuited them on many, many ways. Like they had more soldier power, they had more artillery, they pretty much had a lot of stuff on their side. And Americans were going in pretty much not ill prepared, but they were going in not fully prepared as what they should have been. And the fact that they had to stay there for a whole month.
And like the coldest time of the year, not to mention. I mean, also here within these first few minutes of the episode, we get Winters in his foxhole trying to shave, and I love
She,
that. And
it's
he's all pegging the ice out with the knife. Like, I mean,
it,
you can just see from what he's wearing. Clearly, he's not dressed up for winter. I mean, if he would have a thicker jacket on. His, I don't get why. And obviously, I get why because they were short of supplies. But you would think they would always have their hands covered because of the cold, right?
Mhm.
No gloves. I mean, that's why people are getting frostbite, trench foot. So was trench foot a big deal? Like well, not a big deal. Obviously, it was a big deal, but like, especially in this time of year, no one because they're not able to walk around much, right? Because
Yeah.
of yeah,
Well, you got to remember too, part of it is like their feet are cold, their feet are wet. So they're trying to get things taken care of there too. So you got to remember that part too plays a huge part. They don't have change of clothes. So one of them, it's like you said, you see the dude's socks up, he's trying to dry them,
yeah, and
and
it's
he's
not
not
going
going
to
to
dry
dry.
the temperatures. Yeah.
So most of them, because like we said, the biggest thing for most Americans were injuries that they could not take care of.
Hmm.
It, like we said, with the short supply. But you also got to remember too, a lot of them froze. A lot of them, and it's not even a funny situation.
Oh no.
It's a very scary situation, because one of the things that stands out to me is Eugene walking around and he sees a pile of bodies
Yeah.
sitting there.
Are those American soldiers too?
That I don't know.
Yeah, because it seemed like they might have been German soldiers, but it's hard to tell.
But like even when he goes back and tries to bring, try to go back to see if he can scavenge supplies in that little area that they're going to, right? To they didn't even have supplies either. and you even saw like a whole thing of bodies there too. It's a very grave situation.
Oh yeah.
It is not. It's a very scary thing, and war is always scary. But this is a battle of unknowns. You
Hmm.
don't know what's going to happen. The whole time when you see the guys walking around the trench or in their foxholes, right? You see them sitting there paranoid a little bit at points because they don't know. Just like what was it? The attacks could happen during the night. They could happen during the day. They could happen anytime. But the whole time too, it's like you see, and that's why I kind of like Eugene's story in this because Eugene is trying to do whatever he can to save as many people as he can. But you could tell it's starting to put a toll on him too,
Oh yeah.
because in some ways it's kind of that thing too. It's like you're not going to be able to save everyone there. And I think that's also a big thing because there's times where you just see him zone out because he doesn't know how to react to things. He doesn't know how to feel.
I love that still. It's kind of like a still shot of him, but he's like just sitting on like a log or whatever, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he's kind of sitting in silence. But in the background, you can hear all the artillery fire and all that stuff. But it's from a distance too, because I think we talk about how it's, obviously the sub-zero temperatures, the unknowns, but let's talk about the fog too. The fog plays a huge role. I mean, it plays a huge role in any battle, even if it's just fog,
Well,
right?
that and the snow played a huge part of it.
Visibility, yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
but in some ways too, this is kind of another thing that we get to see a little bit of a soldier going through a form of PTSD. When you really see that, that's why I said I think Eugene did it perfectly because not only is he one that is going to see what happens on the front lines, right? He's also the one that has to heal up people or have to do things if it's surgery or morphine or all that, and he has to be the one that makes the decision because at this time with the shorter supplies you're going to have to make a vast decision. It
I also think with Roe, he is like the perfect character that they could have picked to have the basis of this episode on, right? Because
Yep.
we that's the trend throughout this show is,
They,
usually focus on one character or maybe two characters, but typically one. And I just love how it was chosen for him to be the guy for this episode.
and
It's just
I and I don't think it was a bad choice at all. When you really look at it's like I said, he kind of not only does he give you the sense of what the Easy Company's dealing with, shorter supplies, everything like that, but he's also dealing with okay now in some ways too. You kind of see him have a love interest as well, and
yeah.
then all of a sudden she's gone because of an attack on the little city that they go to. Um, and that's a big scene to me too, because when you have, I can't remember who he's in the foxhole with at the end of it, but you see him have that like that little piece of garment that he knows was hers,
Mhm.
and he just rips it and puts it on because essentially it's kind of like a metaphor too, like she wouldn't just sit there and not do anything. So use this to help.
Yeah.
And it's just a really powerful thing because Eugene brings also another concept in because like we talked about too, he really wasn't in a lot of the episodes beforehand. He was this kind of was his first time in the spotlight. You know, we don't see him in I think the only one we said we might have seen him in is in episode 2,
Yeah.
but we don't I don't remember in episode 3.
No, he's
I
not.
don't
Well, it's even like when we talk, like even like that. So like I was thinking about this too when I was watching these episodes where uh Bull Randleman, we have that episode on Bull, but in like these episodes, like you see him once or twice. You don't see him much.
no, you don't.
Uh so maybe it's like the same thing with this.
Well, just like Gurnir, right?
Yeah.
Gurnir is kind of the same way. You see him in small things. The only one that I will say he kind of stays persistent throughout
Is
is
Lipton?
Buck. Well,
Okay.
Lipton too. Buck is a big one too because Buck's been in it since the beginning too.
Malarkey. Does Malarkey have his own episode?
Well, I kind of take his episode. I think it's like episode 3 when he goes back. It's either episode 3 or episode 4 when he go. I think it's episode 4 because he goes back to get all the guys' his clothes.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've always been in that feeling of to me this would have been a perfect story from Malarkey's eyes I feel like Malarkey is a great character and he is very heroic through history with this unit. So that's where I'm kind of like, I wish we would have gotten more from him.
from Malarkey.
But I don't dislike what they did with this episode because Eugene is a great way to do this. It's
Hmm.
on multiple fronts. It just really shows you kind of a unique thing that even though it's kind of like a sense of he has to deal with that, like he can't save every
Well, yeah,
person.
and it's the perfect situation, I think, too, just because of everything that's going on,
Mhm.
right? The brutality of it all, with it being honestly just them stuck out in the cold, no winter
Yeah,
gear, nothing like that. And then when injuries take place, it's a different animal. I mean, hypothermia, all that kind of stuff too. I
hypothermia,
love
like you said, frostbite, trench foot.
frostbite. Yeah, I mean, I love when he talks to that one soldier where I forget who it was off the top of my head, but he was telling him you need to keep movement, and loosen up
Yeah,
your boots a little bit. Stuff
yeah,
like that. I mean, and that's cool too because he was giving him medical advice in the field, and it kind of it shows that somebody kind of they all care, right? But it
right,
just shows that he's kind of cares for his men's well-being. We got to
right.
make sure you guys are good.
Well,
Yeah.
like even then, another point I want to bring up too is how Winters was in this episode, and especially with Eugene,
Mm.
because there was a moment. I can't remember the captain's name. He was in episode 3. He was Bly's commander.
I'm blush.
Welsh.
Well,
Welsh.
got it, got it.
When you see him deal with Welsh, that was one of my favorite morphine scenes because he
Mhm.
says, "Oh, like," but it shows you how much that morphine helped. That's why I said this whole scene. It's this whole like that whole scene to me is even when they get hit like a tourniquet going and everything like that. You get them on the Jeep, and even Winters tells them, go back into town, get yourself a hot meal. Because he knows Eugene has been affected and it affected quite a bit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like even when he's going like Eugene's going around and scavenging for stuff, right? I like to see him with Winters because he even knows like he can tell like when somebody's there because he caught the German soldier in the midst. And this is why I say it's such a scary thing because you brought up the fog, I bring up the snow.
Hmm.
It does camouflage a lot of things. You
Hmm.
don't know what's going to happen. You don't It could be artillery like they dealt with every time. You could be a soldier just walking in the midst and you don't know. You
Yeah.
could be walking yourself into enemy fire. There's a lot of things that are going on that you don't know.
I would think too, there was a lot of people that got lost in just the forest, just because it's a forest. I
Yeah.
mean, we hear about stories like that all the time where people just get lost in a forest. And one thing I wanted to bring up too with Roe, it's a simple thing too, is you don't realize it, but the man is around death all the time.
Yeah.
He's the closest one to death, right? I mean, he sees it. That's just I know that's cliche to what we've been saying. I don't need to hype the man up any more than we
But
need to,
but
but
that's essentially like I was saying.
yeah.
And this is why I enjoyed this episode so much because it gives you a way of looking at it through a different set of eyes. But not only that, it's like you said, he's close to death every time he's around somebody.
Hmm.
And the fact that it's a form of PTSD when he can't save everyone. You see throughout, he was so healthy, but then you could see how much it deteriorated him
Yeah.
over time. It is something that you have to look at. And with the lack of supplies and everything being a big factor in that, it really can affect them. For a while, you only saw the couple things of morphine in their hands. And that's when he's starting to go scavenge up. And then when he goes to Dyke, Dyke goes, what if I get hit? Because I'll be here to help you.
Where's my foxhole?
Yeah. And then he goes, I don't tend to get hit. But it was just one of those things like, okay, like,
You're the leader, bro. Like,
but even then, you got to remember too, it's like all the other ones were like even kind of the same way, but they were like, hey, we'll help wherever we can because they don't know what's going to happen. And the fact is that the only help they really had, I think it was Patton who came in to help out. Um, General Patton did,
Hmm.
with his tanks and everything like that. But the 101st always swears, and that's why I kind of like the little, you know, how they give you that little monologue after, like the little sayings and stuff.
Yeah.
They always say the 101st said they never needed their help,
Yeah.
you know, because it's just how tough it is. And that's why I said, when you hear the dude say nuts, that is a very iconic thing during this battle. And it, it they pretty much, the story goes, is German forces, knowing that they outnumbered US forces, asked him to surrender.
I have this episode on as we're talking, and I think I'm at like the first artillery shell scene. It's intense, man. Um, and one thing I didn't think about too is trees being blown up in this
Mhm.
episode. You know, or just that element of, like, oh wow, can you imagine just being crushed by a tree? There is actually a scene like that in either this, I think it's this episode maybe, or
Yeah.
the next episode. But yeah, no, yeah, it's. Or there, I think there was also a part in this too where somebody actually gets like a piece of wood stuck through their leg from the tree being blown up.
So here's the story behind it. Okay. And I did go look it up. On December 22nd, 1944, at
Mhm.
about 11:30 in the morning, a group of four German soldiers waving two white flags approached the American lines using the Arlen Road from the direction of the Roman or Remo Fosse south of Bastogne. Group consisted of two officers and two enlisted men. Pretty much they were asking for their surrender. So this got all the way up to our Brigadier General Anthony C.
McAuliffe.
McAuliffe, and he was pretty much told that the Germans have sent some people forward to take our surrender. And McAuliffe, still half asleep, according to what Lieutenant Colonel Ned Moore has stated, said nuts and started to climb out of his sleeping bag. Moore then went back into the communication center when he briefed the rest of the division staff of the ongoing situation, including telling them of McAuliffe's remark of nuts.
That's nuts.
And when Major Jones arrived with the message, the staff looked at it before taking it in to McAuliffe. The German surrender demand was typewritten on two sheets. One was in English, the other in German. They had been typed on an English typewriter, as indicated by the fact that the direct or dictate or whatever that is, I can't remember, but because it was just a that's what made this so iconic, because it was just a one word response to a whole letter of surrender, and it paid off because who came out on top.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
But but
Oh,
but I feel like this is a great setup to episode 7, because now it's kind of like, okay, now you got a medic's point of view. Now you're going to get a sense of, you dealt with the supply shortage here. Now you're dealing with a sense of, this is now a soldier's point of view during this battle.
mhm.
So there's two different views in how you look at it. And I think this was such a great setup for what we're going to see in episode 7. And that's what I said. There's really not a lot. I really don't have a lot of negativity to say about this episode.
I
It's one
don't
of my
either. There's
favorites.
really there every scene in this episode is meaningful. It's
Mhm,
impactful. Um, It's just, and like I said, I just think it's so perfect because of the way, though I think also the way that the battle is set up, right? It being foxhole spread out in forest like this,
mhm.
it's so cool that you get to see it from the medic's viewpoint and where he's got to go from place to place to place, hopping around, trying to get supplies, checking on people, stuff like that. And it's just such a cool dynamic. And like I said, we talked about it earlier, but I think that's the one main thing to take away from this that's just so likable. But I mean, besides all that, nothing negative to say about it. I mean, it sucks we lose a couple people in this. Now, the kid, Julian, that gets killed in this, he gets shot.
Yes,
Gets
but
off. Sorry, I shouldn't say
right
killed. Gets
off.
off. Um, the one that gets offed in the episode, Julian. Um, was he in any other episodes? That's another thing.
I don't remember him either.
People. So when people, that's a.
But you got to
I
remember
gotta
too. I think that's the big thing you got to remember here is there's still replacements being sent in.
sent in, right? So that and that's the thing. They could easily kill off. Well,
Well,
they
off
could
people.
easily off them. And I mean, no, that's a simple thing to do, especially if you're a
And in
showrunner.
war, you got to remember too, that was a big thing. And that's where I think episode 4 plays a huge part of this, where you talk about replacements,
Hmm.
because that is a big thing. Because now they are dealing with something like that's why you say you can't get close to them because you never know when they're going to go to
Hmm.
or when you're going to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing to bring up. Like, but see, I think like even with that, you get kind of Eugene's kind of PTSD situation, and in the next episode, you're going to see Buck kind of have a PTSD situation too.
Yeah, Buck.
And
Yeah.
Libden's going to talk a little bit more here. That's why I said it's
Well,
like,
in the next episode, we'll have Lipton as the main the focal character, the focal point character. So,
yeah. But that's why I said like having that, but then like and like you said too, Eugene was a good way because it's like we said, and I know I sound like a broken record here, but this showcases a different thing that you don't see in most war epics. You don't see, and I think this is the thing with a lot of Battle of the Bulge movies, shows they do, or anything with it, is they're not always accurate. And I'm not saying this is completely accurate because we are going to talk in the next episode. There is an inaccuracy, especially when it comes to Lieutenant Dyke. But the thing is that they actually do a pretty good job and not and that's what I loved about that episode too, or this episode too, is there's not a lot of like you have action happen, but that's not the main premise. The main premise is focused on Eugene during these situations. It gives
mm,
you a sense of what he's going through as a medic. Yeah, there is some action, but it's not like episode 7 where we're going to see a lot of action take place.
yeah, and yeah, I think there's a lot more dialogue driven parts in this episode as
Mm-hmm.
compared. Well, I mean, there is in seven, but this one a little bit more, especially because we got that this on this episode of Foxhole Talk.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, that's essentially what everything is in this. Is it's all whole talk, you know?
Yeah. It just makes a great way to look into things a little differently and show you not only the war and the what they had to go through. It was a sense of everything else that Americans or the Allied forces were faced with. It wasn't just on the American front, it was also on multiple fronts. And that's what I said. It's what makes it so interesting. But no, I think this is a great way to kind of lead out, unless there was other points you wanted to talk about with this
No,
episode.
no, I did enjoy. One more thing I wanted to add to it is I did enjoy the kind of the fling, not a fling, but like that, I guess that chemistry between him and the nurse, between Roe and the nurse. I thought
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of an uplifting part, especially in the show with so much devastation, so much death going on. I just think it was nice, especially for that for a character like his. You could kind of relate to him in a way, and I think he kind of deserved that female companionship for a little bit. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know. It was a feel good moment in the episode, which I enjoyed.
Well,
So
that's what made that the last time he goes into the city so devastating
yeah, because he kind of yeah,
because she's gone. She is offed
and he was
by
kind of looking forward probably to seeing her again, right?
yeah, because I think that's why he was so happy because it was like a sense of peace. It was a sense of, you know what, I got somebody here that can help me and
Hmm.
he can trust. But in the long run, with the bombings from the bombers that were going on, she was gone. And that's why I said that fabric to me plays a big role in that. And it's like kind of like a metaphor that he has to move forward, that his men need him.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great point because having that scene where he was just going to keep it as a memento, but then he tears part of it to help the soldier in his foxhole. It was a big thing. But no, I think that's a great way to go out of this episode to talk about Bastogne. Next episode we are going to be covering is the breaking point. Um, so we are excited to continue on this series. We are past halfway through. If you guys have not checked out our other episodes, we do advise you to go back and watch episode 1 through 5, and
Mhm.
then come back to this point as well. Um, and get ready to go with us on our final stretch of the Band of Brothers series. Um, as always, check us out, J4F Podcast, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can also check us out on Spotify and YouTube. If you like this content, if you're watching it on YouTube and you want more of this, hit that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment what's your favorite episode of Band of Brothers. We want to hear your comments, so please comment below. As always, I'm going to turn this over to Patty B to take us.
Yeah, thank you guys for everything. Like B-Dog just said, smash those like buttons, comment away. And thank you, B-Dog, as always. And remember, we do it just for